poetry with other artistic forms. So in a way we could say that sound poetry is an evolving practice, an evolving field, still pushing the boundaries of what we understand as artistic and more specifically literary practice. And that's where we started thinking about these meetings. And Fonovoz tries to explore some of these aspects. Right, Manuel?
Yes. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So as Rui was saying, the concept for this meeting, or these 2 days of meetings, was really, I would say, twofold. On the one hand, we wanted to revisit the history of sound poetry and the different approaches, and on the other hand, we wanted to show what the contemporary practice looks like by bringing authors and performers who are experimenting in different ways, the way we can use voice and language, particularly with current technologies Rui was mentioning. For me, my understanding of sound poetry is that when we look back at the early decades of the 20th century, when the Futurists and the Dadaists experimented with language outside the boundaries of language, they started by using writing and alphabetic writing to deconstruct the way voice was framed by language. And so it's interesting that they were using notation, alphabetic notation, to disembody the words and break the words apart. And by breaking the words apart, they were also freeing the voice from the discipline of language. And I think that's the crucial element, in my view, of sound poetry. The sound poetry is based on the principle that we can free the voice from the discipline of language. And the experiments that have been made over the last 100 years show different ways of achieving this. And I think two crucial moments were first with the audio tapes, with the ability to record one's own voice, well, and of course with the phonograph as well, but the audio tape, the sound tape was much more flexible and allowed for experimentation. So media, in terms of the perception of one's own voice, changed the possibility of breaking breaking language, and also listening to the voice and recovering forms of expressive uses of the voice that were outside the discipline of language. And this, you can see tomorrow, we'll see a recording of Henri Chopin, one of the pioneers of this kind of feedback loop between recording the voice and performing against the recording, or in the collaboration with the recording. And we will see how he has a completely new kind of consciousness about what the voice, what the human breath, and what the ability of not just the voice but the body of to produce sound. And more recently, I think with digital technology, we have again new ways of thinking about the deconstruction of language and the way the voice can be placed in relation to itself and in relation to language. And we see, I think, the four authors that we have here for the performances are within this framework. So the concept of the meeting was really framed around this idea of trying to see the contemporary practice in relation with language, with technology, but also in relation to the history of sound poetry.
Okay, so now presenting the two artists that will perform tonight. I will start with Alfredo here by my side. Alfredo was born in Porto, so he's from Portugal. He lives and works in Barcelona, Spain. He studied sculpture and installation at the Fine Arts School in Paris with Christian Boltanski. And his work stands between visual arts, visual poetry and sound poetry. He has many installations and sound pieces, and they try to include in his words a lo-fi character, having in common this idea of unstable processes, raw materials, gestures, and the manipulation of objects as instruments or instruments as objects as well. And it tries to embed these practices in a phenomenological aesthetics. He's been working since 1995 in various projects of sound art. He performs in solo. He has a lot of noise pieces with multiple languages. From 1999 to 2006, he was a member of the SPI 22A. How do you say that? That was a long time ago. An independent collective for contemporary art. Then from 2001 to 2006, he was also a member of the IBA collective of improvisation. He co-organized some festivals, so there's this collaborative practice as well in several places. And he has given also workshops to live in several, and he has his work shown in many different places. So it's a pleasure for us to have here Alfredo. We will return to him, but now Manuel will present Kinga, our second guest.
Thank you, Rui. Kinga Tóth. She's a writer, a visual and sound poet, also a performer, teacher, translator, philologist, journalist, and her work has been shown in performances, exhibitions, international installations and festivals, and her publications include poetry collections, visual art catalogs, novels, and music records. She has been artist writer in residence in several occasions, and she has received very significant awards in this field of sound poetry, the Hugo Ball for the prize for our intermediate literary work in German language, and also the Bernard Heitzig Prix by the Centre Pompidou and Foundation Buonotto for her performative literary work. And she's currently a PhD student at the University of Debrecen in German Studies. And she was artist in residence at the DAD program in Berlin. So, Kinga, welcome. So, thank you for accepting our invitation. It's really a pleasure to have you here. So I would start maybe by asking the both of you, just thinking about the four performances that we see, and how do you see your work in relation to this type of these different types of works?
Very elaborating, if I'm saying it well. It's very good to be at a circle when you feel like being home or in a family, because I don't know whether you know too much about the Hungarian sound poetry scenario. It doesn't really exist. There are two people. There were three people. Actually, probably you might know Katalin Ladik. She's a wonderful, amazing artist, and she's 83 years old and still hyperactive and really like an amazing performer. We had András Károsi, who passed away 2 years ago, and we have Zsolt Sőrés, who is more from the musical scenario, but still a bit like in a way of sound poetry, and it's me, and that's it. So even if we had Dadaism and Surrealism and all the things and avant-garde, and we have a very like rich culture of the the folk tradition, where we have these extensive vocal techniques and all these things and storytelling only with sounds and gestures. It's just like I don't know, like a red flag or like something which you have to put underground and just not really talk about it and then do not really categorize it or catalog it. So if we have like occasions like this, it's always like a wonderful feeling that you are not like a freak, sorry to say like this, and it does have sense what you are doing, and then it's always very elaborating when you can see that the whole body can be a language or an instrument, a nice tube of the sound, and we do not really need so much electrical things. We can if we want to, but already the human body is such a rich instrument. So I can absolutely join to this way of performance is what we could watch.
First of all, thanks for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. And watching the videos before, I would say that my work stands somewhere in a very weird place, because, of course, these people, what we've seen before, like a heritage for me, but my work is a bit on another side, because it still uses words and semantics, meaning, and things which have disappeared in what we've seen here, which is fantastic. But my work is a bit like using all this, but going back to something that has been lost on the way, which is the words and the languages, because I work in a mix of several languages, because it's part of my identity. So, we will see later during the performance, but all these sounds made by voice, which is used as a way to produce sound, are in my work, but I would say that I'm not especially in that working in that direction, because I'm much closer to what I would say, and let's say a semantic approach of sound poetry in a way. So in a way, it's a bit a mix, because I use lots of sounds which have been generated by my voice, but live, I just most of the time I say words which maybe sound sometimes like sounds which have maybe seem to have lost their meaning, but in the end, if you read, you can, let's say, understand even if you don't understand anything, because there's no idea of a clear meaning, but there's still a kind of narrative which is present somewhere, even if it's very abstract. So I would say that I am a bit in the middle between two approaches. One more phonic, let's say, from the voice, and the other more closer to semantics. I don't know if it's clear, but
as Caroline puts it, what you say may be used against you. One of the reasons why we have brought you together tonight was that you both write in multiple languages. In the case of Kinga, she writes in Hungarian, German, English, and after this event in Portuguese as well. And Alfredo in Portuguese, French, Catalan, Spanish. So my question is, in English of course, how does your multilingualism impact and shape your creative process? And more specifically then for Alfredo, how does this imply or contribute to your sense of confusion and transformation that you like to in your works?
it's always a disaster. By me, it's like a desperate thing to communicate. I do not. I also have to tell. I do not believe in all these labels. I have a huge problem with the labels, like whether it's really like sound poetry, visual poetry. It's like you have a child and a knife, and then just like cut the leg, cut the bones, cut the head. I don't know. I think language or poetry, or I don't know how we say it. It's like a biological, organic, wholesome, and everything is language, or everything can be poetry or body, and so I understand we have to label sometimes or name the parts of it, but on a performance, actually we create a new organic wholesome. So it's very, very not easy to divide these things. From which point is it sound poetry, no? Or from which point is it visual poetry or written poetry? The disaster. Yeah, so there is a desperate thing to communicate with other people, to play with the kind of other one, I imagine. And I try to use everything which I have in my hand. I'm a very practical, village-born person who use the tools. And I have my body, my voice, I have the visions in my head, I have a language what I learned or got from the parents and heard from the Austrian tourists, because I'm coming from the border, and English was just like everywhere. So I really use, like in the gardening, you use all the tools to create a new living organism. And of course it never succeeds, it's fine. But the most aim, or the biggest aim, is to play with the other one, to reach the other one. And then it does not really matter whether it's then the visual coding or decoding, the sound, the decoding, or the textual, the semantic way of the decoding, or it's like the body, the tactility. The most important that when creating something living, because for me written text is mostly like a piece of a dead body, and then it's always very nice to try to create a life to that. So I cannot divide where the languages end. When is the German poor there, when is the English, when is the Hungarian. It's quite organic. Of course, we all, I think we will talk about it later and tomorrow also, we all the time compose. So it's not always like an improvisative mixture of chaos, but it's also a part of it. But by me it's really like telling a story which you can understand on different levels, empirically or individually or intuitively or semantically. For me it doesn't really matter. I just want to reach you and play with you and create with you. So, yeah.
Well, in my case, I'm a bit like you. As you said, I work with what I have close to me, at hand. No? So, due to my personal story, I went through many languages, so that's why I use them. I mean, it's there, so it's practical. So I try to construct something according to that. And you talked about confusion, and I'm conscious that there might be always a place somewhere which generates confusion, because if you speak all the languages I use, then you can understand, even if, as I said before, there's not a clear narrative, but you can understand the words at least. If not, there's always a kind of zone which is unknown, which I like, because I think it's also for me a way to get lost in the language, because in the end, when I'm performing and I'm reading some text which you have to change to skip from a language to the other, in the end it's like another language, I would say, which is coming from somewhere, it's like an inner language which resonates and makes everything possible to exist in the end, even if it doesn't tell anything clear. My intention is not to I try to use words to tell something which is not clear. I don't know if it's clear, something like that. But well, yeah, I'm a bit of a bricoleur, as we say in French. So it's like bits and pieces, and with all I have, I try to generate something which makes sense in a way that doesn't make sense, but it makes sense, and so on, something like that. I don't know.
So one thing that I get from that is perhaps common to both your replies to the question about the multiplicity of languages is that you don't really care about the identity or the category of what you're doing now, in the sense that you are just experimenting with beyond the boundaries and mixing and hybridizing. And I would like to direct your thoughts to the voice and the sound of the voice in that process. So what happens to the voice, and in which way the voice becomes a tool for speaking beyond languages or outside languages, or because I think one of the things that sound poetry suggests is that language is really powerful, but at the same time a limitation. So there's something that we can and should do beyond and outside and in between languages.
According to that, I wanted to say that I always, every word I use comes from another word, because in terms of alliterations, I use lots of alliterations, homophonies. So the sonic quality of language is always present for me. It's fundamental. But there's always a kind of fight between that sonic property and what it means, in a way. So I try to get a kind of balance between what you hear and what you can understand. So and I try not to stay in just one line. It's a kind of going forward and always twisting between several things. I don't know if it's what you wanted to say.
No. Yeah, that's what I was asking. Yes.
I think it's also the freedom of playing, which we so many times just forget. The Hungarian song poets or performers are also, and actually all the people I got to know from this area are very playful and free people who are not afraid to open themselves to for creating the perfect sound. And that was actually my aim, and especially in this work I'm going to present today is about when the information is coming from the outer world, how you are internalizing it, how you open your body for creating the answer and for the perfect sound. It sounds a bit like strange, I know, but I think as I mentioned before, the human body can be like an instrument or a tube, and of course there's a lot of physical movement and training and practicing how you create the specific voice or sound which can have a meaning. And there's not a problem with that, and it can even have a semantic meaning. What you also said, the words can be also like tools or like opening gates for new sound constructions which are happening actually alive. That's why it's so interesting, I think, that we can perform alive, because there's always new constructions or sculptures are coming up from all these elements. But I also have to say I write like normal books too, also because otherwise you just will never get published. So I try to make like clean texts, like nice behaving texts, written texts. That's also a big question, what is a text, but I'm not talking that much. but I'm manipulating a lot, so there are also like visual elements, and there are sound elements, and there are like QR codes which lead to different performances. So I try to be as cheeky as I can in a dead object called book, but I think everything which is really important happens on the live performance. So there is the new sound or language creating.
I just wanted to add something, because before you asked about the voice as a tool. So in my case, it's very personal. I have to say that I hate my voice. So once I was asked, why do you write these things and you do these performances and blah blah blah, I said, because I don't like my voice. So I try to get closer to something which belongs to me, but which is not part of my body, the voice. And I think it happens to everybody. It's always very weird to hear our own voice when it's recorded. No, we always are surprised. So I think it's like an effort trying to like my voice. I think it's one of the maybe reasons why I do that is maybe because I think that unconsciously, with the years, I may like my voice. So that's why I don't perform. When I perform, and you will listen tonight, it's always very like this, because I'm not able to do things like people, what we watched before, because I tried, I tried. I don't know if I've tried, but it's not my... So the way of working with the voice as a tool, it's more subtle, because when I read, a lot of my texts are like incantations, with no breath, with no respiration, with no breathing, So sometimes it's like a control, but inside you have to control the volume, the saliva, everything which is coming out when you don't take the time to breathe. So sometimes there are accidents, hopefully not tonight, we'll see. But it's always very subtle in a way. So that's the way I use the voice as a tool, like a very fragile, but not very, maybe not very interesting in that way, because it's very, very, I would say like...
Flat?
Flat. Yeah, flat.
I think Kinga wants to say something.
It's so cool what you are saying. I also just remember when I started with the whole thing in the village, I didn't know anything about sound poetry that time. It was really like I was very, very young, and we had like a noise and punk band. And while I was the shouter, and then while shouting, I realized that I can produce some sounds from my belly, but it was very like an instinctive thing. And then we were like, so someone, a curator, heard or thing, and then we were invited to the worst Hungarian thrash music festival, because we had a potential for winning it. And after that, there were like articles about that I'm in a connection with the Satan, and then I'm a satanic woman and a hexa. What is it? A witch, because of the producing of the sounds. But that time I already know that it's sound poetry existing, and then it's like a total normal way of producing the sounds. But I also had bad years, just like. Confronting myself whether I'm allowed to produce some sounds, because sound can have connotations, because we are institutionalized, and then sometimes we have like, unfortunately, labels to different sounds. We could listen to some sounds, wonderful throat singing or belly singing or stomach singing, and it's actually a gift, a talent, and you have to exercise a lot. And it's still like some cultures or like some journalists who cannot code it, because it's still not in the schools, and we still don't study enough about this kind of way of poetry. yeah, so I understand these things.
I think I would like to bring to the conversation this aspect of diversity in two different ways. For instance, Kinga, you're a writer, a performer, a teacher, a translator, a philologist, a journalist, a copywriter. And I'm sure that Alfredo, for many contingencies of life, has also done a lot of professions, dealt a lot with a lot of different roles. And the first thing is, how do these diverse roles influence and inform your artistic practice? But I'd like to push that a little bit forward and bring also the idea of collaboration with other artists that deal in different disciplines. We have seen Steven and Americo and even Maja performing here as individuals alone with their bodies. And even though Maja talks about this idea of orchestration of voices, she was alone, well, with technology, but alone. But in your cases, I think that you have an experience of working with festivals, producing anthologies, and therefore you are used to working in a collaborative way. So I would also like to hear from you of how collaboration challenges, what challenges result from these processes, and how do they influence the idea of the artist as an individual alone in his or her craft.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to take these labels also so serious. I mean, it's already suspicious if you are so many things. I mean, it cannot work, of course. But it's true, I always had, thanks God, I always had like jobs where I could work with other people, especially in the pedagogy or also like a journalist or a curator. It's always a team working task. You have to exercise a lot, and I like it a lot, and I think it's very important how we function in a society and how we can work also on different ways, like also in different institutions, and learning the patterns and also the to do things. I mean, first I also worked as a manager in a gas and also in a car factory and in a meat factory too. So I had to learn how to work with different people with some very, very different interests. But this is a normal situation in East Europe and poverty, so you just get the job which is offered, and I tried my best. So, but back to the collaboration, I think it's super important, and after these residencies you already mentioned, they were actually the saving kits or saving tools for me. That was the first time I could work in institutions where they said that it's not a nonsense what I'm doing, and I could meet other artists and people. And I'm still working, for example, with the componist and composer and musician Silvia Rosani. We've been working together since 12 years with different huge, washing machine bellies and self-composing electronic things. This I don't know anything about, but Silvia does. She can program also, and I'm just giving my body and my voice and the stories. Or there is also another composer from Slovakia, Miroslav Tóth. I worked a lot, mostly 10 or 15 years ago with, and he was the one who opened me the world of the classical music and the classical composing, inviting me in his choir to do some extensive vocal when you have to work with people from academic musical background. So this is also like a different field. Or also in the DEA, they program at the moment, there are composers I'm working with. Yeah, I mean, this is always wonderful. You learn a lot. It's also good for your ego because it's always like a huge fight about whether you have the right to go to the stage, whether you really have to say something or use the microphone for a good reason or so. But if you work in a team, then it's a learning process and a common creating, which I actually love the most. Or with the visual and sound artist Gergely Normal, I've been working for 14 years, whose video you can see. We're not working at the moment, but we work 14 years in different fields. So there are a lot of collaborations, which is always a huge joy to get to know another person and another person's word and way of thinking, and you learn a lot of staying humble and absolutely not taking serious what you are doing, but on the other hand taking very serious and take the responsibility for the other person or the community to create together.
Well, I remember when I was like 10 years old, I started to learn different instruments. And my father had a friend, he was a musician, and he told me that I would never be a musician. I was just a curious guy. So I felt like offended and angry. And maybe it's because of that I try to work with diversity. I don't know if it's because of that, but I remember that moment where, how can you say that? If the aim of someone is that just to experiment with things and to try to find out different things. So I've always been in collaborative projects. I work with cinema. I work with expanded cinema, for example. I have several projects of expanded cinema where I make sound. I work with other musicians. I've done some collaborative works in sound poetry too. Some years ago with a collective from Marseille, which doesn't exist anymore. So I've always been involved in these collaborative projects. I still have some musical or sound projects on with different musicians from other countries, and I think it's fundamental in my work. I've always done something which is not in a clear direction. So for me, it's like being in a normal. It's like a normal thing to share and to learn from others and to have this constant way and back with not just in terms of doing, but also in terms of energy. And one thing which is very important for me is that if I have to collaborate with someone, there must be very good energy. Otherwise, even if I like the work very much, I've done this several times, if the energy is not proper, I would not, it has always failed. I mean, the collaborative work has not been satisfying. So it's a question of energy, a question of exchange in a way. And I'm still always open to new collaborative projects. And it's part of, because when I studied fine arts, it was very difficult for me to keep one line. So I was using sound, I was using photography, I was using light, I was using many things. So in the end, because for me it's all the same. As you said before, everything is poetry, everything is art, as long as it has been thought as art. So I have no problem with this kind of. Someone wrote about my work saying that it's a kind of nomadism. I like this idea, like to be a nomad, going from here to there, because it's always a way to learn, I think.
So I was thinking that we've been here maybe for 45 minutes now, and I wonder if there are questions or comments from those in the room. Yes.
Not exactly a thing I just remembered. Late 70s or early 80s, mid 80s, I think I heard the first, what later I discovered, the first recording of sound poetry, which was an LP of UNESCO with the music throat sounds of the Inuits of Canada. Later on, much later on, I discovered sound poetry, and then I established a bridge. And I understood everything mutually. Sound poetry helped me to understand better the Inuits of Canada and vice versa. And this process was absolutely discovering a new world. This is fantastic. Just a note to Kinga. I love to discover someone alternative from Hungary other than artful and gallant type people, which I correspond with many times, but it's always great to expand the alternative scene of Hungary and knowing people from that scene. Thank you.
Do you want to comment?
I just thought about the Hungarian traditional folk music. We already had a conversation a little bit with Sia yesterday at the airport at night. We also have some sounds. So our folk songs is always like storytelling, but it's always either with the working thing, so you have to cook, or the women, mostly the women were the people who did the folk songs, and then they had to, I just don't know the words, they had the corn, and then they had to remove the small corn from the big corn, and while doing this, they were telling the stories, but many times just like sounds. Not always, because our folk songs are very like enigmatic. The most of the things were in the sounds, and you know already when there is danger, when there is anger, when there is happiness, or so there are these non-verbal things always with sounds, or with this way of working added or shown. And then the alternative scene in Hungary, I would suggest everything what happens in Trafo. Trafo is still like a kind of a free organization and institution where you still can perform, and it's not really, thanks God, it's not in connection with the Hungarian government. There is the Under 500 festival, which is like just happening now, where there's everything. So the dance and performance, and also participative theater, and also some traditional poetry and music going on. There are some places in Budapest where you still can go, but it's not too much. Yeah, it's not easy at the moment. Yeah.
I wonder if there are any more questions or comments from the audience. No? So maybe I would ask both of you to just briefly tell us what you're going to perform tonight. What should we expect? Alfredo.
I will perform 3 pieces. That's it. I mean, if I tell, let's talk afterwards if you want. One will be here, another here, and another there. It's okay?
Good trailer.
What else?
What is the Maria machine?
I mean, it's a super long story. I don't know how to keep it short. I will do today prayers. Yeah, I'm researching like the art of the nuns. Exactly, first in Debrecen, and now I'm going to do my research in Salzburg from this year. So I visit monasteries. And I'm super interested in the way how nuns are performing and creating art. And it has a big impact on my way of working in terms of recycling everything, the sound, the material, everything which is material, also the texts. So I'm going to pray for us, for a better future, and that's it.
We have more details now.
Anyone else? Okay, so let me ask you this: do you think that you work in the margins? We've been hearing words like peripheries, and Alfredo is an expatriate in a way, right? Or a migrant. We have introduced sound poetry as being something that pushes the boundaries of language against the discipline of language, and we know that there is no outside of language. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about this feeling of being marginal or marginalized even, or if it's just...
It comes to my mind, talking about that. I was talking one day with Keith Rowe. I don't know if you know him. He's a very, let's say, a pioneer in improvised music from the group AMM. And he said, he's like, now he must be like 80 years old. He said, when there is more than 30 people in the audience, I start to think what I'm doing. So, I mean, it's not something that you wish, but it's something which is real. When you're working on the boundaries of something and you're looking for something new, and I didn't want to say new, different. When you're looking for something different, so then, I mean, it's the reality of things. It's very difficult to be in the center of anything. So you're always in the margins. I used to say some years ago that sound poetry was like the suburbs of experimental music, and I think it's still true. I mean, if I have to count all the times I have to perform sound poetry according to sound, I mean, it's just the minimum. It's like maybe 10% compared to all the times I can perform sound, just sound, and which is compared to other kinds of art, maybe it's also a 10%. So, I mean, it's not that we want to be in the margins, it's that the things we do just push us to the margins. I mean, and it's okay. You have to be, as Keith Rowe said, you have to be with 80 years old, which is not bad. He made no concessions. I mean, if you're still thinking like that, I mean, you have to be conscious that I mean, it's the place where you have to be is around somewhere around.
So there's something that occurs to me, that there's a certain politics of listening related to sound poetry and certain kinds of music, and some, I would say there's some institutional dimension to the fact that society is somehow prevented from expanding ways of listening by being subject to a very strict regime of what is an acceptable sound and what is to listen, what is to hear. And I would like maybe to ask you to think about what you do in terms of this idea of a politics of the ear, of what is possible to listen.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, I'm coming from the pedagogy. I also have a pedagogical background. I taught children from 3 until people like 80 or 70 years old. There's no problem with the people, especially not with the children. It's really like the institutions. If you do like workshops with the children or just like play with them, they don't know about it, that the sound they listen to are not okay or marginalized. This is all our fault. That's the labeling. That's the problem. And that this is the politics. When we teach or children or the newer generation how to listen and how to decode and how to answer or create to or signs we are giving. So actually, I just can come back to you what you said about the marginalizing. It's not our fault. We do our best, and then these are the institutions who push these things. Sometimes there are curators not as wonderful like you because you read everything and you prepared, but there are curators who are not doing that. They just see your name and then invite you, and then they are super shocked when you perform and you do your thing. So that's why I got sometimes super big audience, but it was like a mistake. But yeah, so I think we have responsibility to not, I mean, teach. It's already a hierarchy. I don't know, to show the freedom of the creation and the freedom of the listening and the decoding, and not just let our children learn the institutional way, how to read a poem properly, how to listen to a sound properly. I can say one example, and then I just finish. My cousin had a baby 2 years ago, and the whole family was in shock because the baby produced like sounds like this. So she was not communicating at all, only doing this. And she called me, the Kinga, you do these things. Can you say a thing when you are a pedagogue? We have a problem. We took the baby to different doctors, and then we don't know what's going on. She is not communicating with us. And then we found out it was the pillow, because white noise is super good for children, and she had like a panda bear pillow with a white noise radio thing, I don't know the name of it, because she was crying so much. And then my cousin just bought this, and the baby didn't know that it's a mistake what she is creating. She was just referring to the wonderful sound which actually made her chill. So, you know, there's no problem until we go into the institutions, and if we have the power, because we already have jobs and experience or so, we can push the boundaries of these institutions and then show the people, or just like remind them that we have this possibility to read or decode freely.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of context, because sometimes when I perform, I do like loud sounds or very high-pitched sounds, but in a concert people do like that, and they seem to be annoyed. But when they take the subway and there's a very high-pitched sound, they don't hear it, and I hear it, and it bothers me. So who's doing the worst? I mean, it's just that they know they expect to be in a concert, so this is out. So they just identify it as a bad or weird or whatever. But when they're in another context, they don't even listen to it, because they're used to lots of sounds that they don't hear because they haven't been educated. So I think it's a question of context. When you contextualize things, it's much clearer.
So maybe next time Miguel, as Gim, will invite us to do sound poetry in the subway instead of in Oku.
Would be nice.
That's right.
Still okay? I like very much the idea of politics of the year, and POM is a conference, an international conference on politics of the machine. It was in Germany last June, and we see in the history of sound poetry that technology has been adopted and appropriated by the early sound poets as a kind of a disembodiment machine, or a liberating form for the voice. I'm not sure if technology is like that anymore. So my next question is about technology. And what are your, first of all, how do you use technology in dialogue with your voice, and what are the challenges of it? But more importantly, what are your thoughts on the future of sound poetry, considering this continued evolution of technology and what new technologies you are excited about these days?
I'm very old school and slow, but I made the progress this year after 15 years of using the looper pedal of my previous partner, who was a guitar player, and you can only do this with that. That's it. Now I have another looper machine where you have 5 buttons, so you can do this 5 times, and you have 5 channels. One thing is I'm really slow. The other thing is I think it's very interesting what our body can already make as an instrument. But I'm super how was the word? Not satisfied. Amazed, and I really love the way how people can use the technology. That's partly true that I don't know anything about it, because in the collaboration, for example, with Silvia or with Balint Bolcsó or Gida Labus, like nowadays we have a new band. They work with a lot of electronic devices who are working with your movements and sensoring or live creation, also by Antoni Rajekov from Bulgaria, or tomorrow we will listen to Jörg Piringer, who has like wonderful wonder and magic machines and whatever's. He will tell about it more. And I think it's super important, and I think it's amazing that there are people who are doing this. But it's also very important that there exist also old school people like me or others who are more working with the body. And the best is when these two or many types are together. I think it's a very enriched world. I love hybridity and I love these human-machine things. What I do not really like that much sometimes, if the AI wants to control, but I mean it's already too late, so...
I agree with you, but I wouldn't call it old school, because if there's an old school, it means that there's a new school. I don't think there is old or new school. It's just you have many possibilities, and whoever needs to work in that way, then it's perfect. I mean, I have nothing against technology, as long as what I hear or what I see touches me, arrives to me, so I have no problem with that. In my case, I don't use technology, or very little. I use the computer just to make some editions, but not as a creative tool in per se. I use other means which are maybe belong to my generation. I use old cassettes, for example. One of the pieces I'm going to perform tonight is with Walkmans and cassettes, because it was my generation, the 80s, you know, the cassette thing and all this stuff. So it's not that I'm nostalgic, it's just that I've always worked with this media, and I don't use the computer as a creative tool in a way. I mean, I use it for edition, as I said before. So, I mean, it's just a question of personal need and personal way of expression. And I think, as you said, it's good when everything can exist and not just a kind of uniform thing, you know. In Barcelona, there's a master in sound art, and one of the teachers once told a student that if she wasn't able to use Max MSP, she would never be a sound artist. First of all, sound artist is a bit strange as a definition anyway, but to say that, I mean, it's completely stupid, and it's a way to kill creativity. How can you be something if you use that, or not be that if you use this? It's completely stupid. I mean, there are people who perform with nothing, and it's fantastic, it's marvelous. The only thing I think is to be able to develop something inside what you think is your own necessity. That's it.
So what do you think about synthesized voices? No, because engineers now, they're all obsessed about mimicking human voices, but they always think about languaged voices, so voices that are already structured into some kind of language. And what do you think about artificial voices and synthetic voices?
Shall I answer? Yes. Personally, because it's always your own impression, I don't like that. It doesn't mean that if, as an idea, it doesn't mean that if I listen to one piece, maybe I will love it. There's this American sound poet, Ian Hatcher. I don't know if you've heard about him. Yeah, the first time I listened to him, I thought it was so that was the trick. And it's marvelous, it's fantastic. I mean, how to produce fake voices with a real voice, or real voices with fake voices, I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's the problem is the technology or not technology. I think the problem is to do something which makes sense. That's it. Whoever does that, and what makes sense, what you can you can have a relation with. That's it. I mean, not more than that, I think.
I super agree.
Thank you.
Shall we close? Any question or comment? Maybe we should bring this to an end, you think? Okay. So let us thank Alfredo, Monteiro and Kinga Tóth for this really enlightening conversation. So thank you very much. And we look forward to your performances tonight.